Welcome to the Business Performance Podcast, where we feature expert thought leaders and cover their best strategies, stories, and advice that you can use to successfully mature your own business performance. Now, here is your host, business coach Henry Schneider. Hello, everyone. This is Henry Schneider with the Business Performance Podcast. And today it's my pleasure to speak with Ravi Venkatesan of Bakkt, which recently acquired his company Bridge2 Solutions. And so at Bakkt, he is now the head of innovation. So Ravi, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Henry. And hi, everyone. Good to be here on this podcast.
Okay, so to begin with, Ravi, could you please briefly describe, I guess we'll start with Bridge2 Solutions and then Bakkt. And what does the company do? Who are your customers and what type of products and services do you offer?
Sure. So, and all this is public information, just sharing. Bridge2 Solutions served enterprise loyalty programs. And in plain English, what that means is that if you as a consumer are flying and earning miles, staying at a hotel earning points, spending money on a credit card and earning points, when you go redeem that currency, that loyalty currency, and you either get gift cards or merchandise or book travel, that's all powered by what Bridge2 built. So even though you might go to a bank's website and say, I have earned these many points on my credit card and I'm redeeming it and I'm booking some travel, and you are interacting with that bank and their website, behind the scenes, it is the Bridge2 engine that powers that. So that's the Bridge2 story, and grew very nicely. Bakkt set out with a mission to unlock the value of digital assets, and is a startup that's been incubated and came out of ICE, which is the same company that owns the New York Stock Exchange. And the first thing Bakkt did was create a crypto Bitcoin futures and options product, and are subsequently kind of traveling this journey of becoming the most trusted, secure exchange wallet where you can interact with the crypto world without having to worry about all the murky side of it and being completely insulated from that. And as Bakkt came on this journey, it was just very obvious that what Bridge2 had built could accelerate the vision that Bakkt had set out with. And so it was kind of like a match made in heaven, and very pleased that we completed that merger in February.
Okay, just in time to start working from home, right?
I know, exactly. That was, in many ways ironic.
Yeah. So, so is this a business to business type of arrangement? And so the consumer, it's invisible to the consumer what's going on?
Great question. So Bridge2's business was essentially business to business. And even though consumers interacted with it, they never saw the Bridge2 brand. So they were interacting, like I said, with their bank or their airline or their hotel. And behind the scenes, it was Bridge2's engine that was powering that loyalty reward redemption. Bakkt's vision is directly towards consumers. So Bakkt's vision is to launch a consumer app, which is going to come out in September. And that consumer app will allow you and me as a consumer to just download this on our iOS or Android device and be able to look at all the balances we have across different loyalty programs, be able to liquidate that currency for things that we want, be able to take that shopping anywhere and everywhere that we shop and use the loyalty rewards currency to pay for day-to-day things. So it's a very, very ambitious and incredible vision that'll solve and simplify a lot of problems for our day-to-day consumer lives.
Okay, so you could take like your airline miles and convert that to cash?
As an example, absolutely.
Oh, wow. That's pretty cool. Yeah, because I've also done stuff like, like consumer surveys, and you earn points for that, but it's all locked up and you only can get their loyalty program. So I guess you can convert that into cash too and pull it out.
And that's why we use the term unlock. If you think about what's the number one problem, it's not that you can't get value, right? You go to an airline's website and you can figure out, obviously you can use it for flying on their own product. And sometimes you can order a gift card and sometimes you can do other things as well. But it's not as easy. And then if you have bits and pieces of currency in 5 different loyalty programs, there's no easy way to unlock that value and bring it all together. That's the other problem. And interesting little tidbit is, 80% of the gift cards that people order from these loyalty programs are not for gifting. They're just for going and using at some store somewhere.
Right.
So you've got the artificial sort of friction in the mix where people are buying gift cards which are meant for gifting, but they're not really used for gifting. They're just using it as a way to go get to a store and buy something, right? And this solves all that.
So interesting for the airline program, you convert your miles to cash. So where does the cash originate from? Does it come from the airline then? So you have like 1,000 miles.
So it can work in many different ways, but the simplest example would be that I have, let's say, 1,000 miles with my airline that I've earned as part of flights that I've taken with them. The airline owes me the value of those 1,000 miles. If I decide to use it to go get an iPad instead of taking another flight, then Bakkt would facilitate that through this app and get compensated by the airline for that value. And then Bakkt would allow me to get that iPad or go make that purchase. So that's how it works.
Okay, so I guess Bakkt then takes some percentage of that transaction then too.
Potentially, there are many different business models. That's one potential way in which Bakkt would make money in this mix.
Okay, all right. So since you are now the head of innovation, this is an interesting solution or problem they're working on. But are they more concerned than about the data aspect to get an understanding of how the data flows back and forth, or is it more about actually making the connections and converting the currency?
Yeah, so all those are concerns. In fact, we've done extensive consumer studies, and the number one concern consumers have is how do they ensure the security and the privacy of their data. So we take that very seriously and have extremely rigorous processes, as well as go through a lot of certifications to ensure that we have the highest standards of data protection and controls, both internal and external, to ensure that a consumer's data is protected.
Okay. So how do you handle currency conversions? Because people have things like this all over the world. So how do you handle the conversions? Because that's up and down, it fluctuates so rapidly.
Yeah, it's like any other sophisticated exchange, right? And if you think about the heritage of the company, Bakkt is owned by Intercontinental Exchange, which sort of powers the most complex and sophisticated exchanges on the planet, and in a very efficient and effective manner. So some of that heritage helps us in robustness that we can bring to this solution and this market.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. All right, so I always like to ask my guests, about the word quality. Quality is a very broad term and means lots of different things to different people. So what does quality mean to you?
Yeah, so it's fit to purpose is the definition that I like the most, because there is the concept of gold plating, which is quality that you don't need and overdoing something. And there is the concept of releasing something into a consumer's hands where there are serious glitches and serious issues with it. So the level where it doesn't have any serious issues or glitches, but where it's not been over baked, over hardened, and it hasn't been artificially made so much more expensive because we triple tested it, is kind of where I define the quality level to be, right? And that's how I view quality.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, so now, what are some of the biggest misconceptions out there about quality that you've encountered?
like I said, I think the concept that it has to, anything that has zero defects, that's one. The other misconception is sometimes quality ends up being conflated with expectations that a consumer of a product might have. You know, the quality level of a Chevy might be perfect, but it's a Chevy. And if I'm expecting it to be a Cadillac, that's not poor quality. That's just a different expectation that I carry. Right? That's the other misconception I've seen a lot. And the third misconception of quality is that it's a matter of degree, right? There is 5 nines and there is 10 nines and there is 90% level. And so for a particular thing, what is acceptable? If it's a rocket, if it's brain surgery, if it is healthcare, I want that high level of quality.
Right.
If it's somebody doing my yard and they missed a few spots, I'm okay with this level of quality. So that's where I go back to the fitment of purpose definition.
Yes, yeah. There's a whole spectrum in there where games could be at the bottom, but brain surgery is the top. So.
Yeah.
Okay, so those quality challenges that you've encountered, how do you get people beyond those misconceptions so that they can actually see what the right thing is?
Yeah, I think whether it's with internal teams or customers, the key is always about setting the right expectations. Because if you don't set the right expectations, how are you going to meet them, right?
Yeah.
So I'm a big fan of simplify as much as possible, articulate, and educate, right? Because if we can't simplify a message, there's no way to articulate it. If we can't articulate it, there's no way to educate either a customer or an employee or a partner, whoever it is. So a lot of time that I personally spend is in taking our pitch, our products, our services, and just simplifying how we explain them, how we talk about them.
And then if you're talking to a potential customer and they want something a little bit different, they've got how do you extract that information out so then you could probably take it back and modify the product?
Yeah, and this is one of those tricky subjects and tricky topics, and we have a lot of internal debates on this topic all the time, because you have to listen to customers and their feedback and utilize that to improve the product. At the same time, it's the old Ford saying that if I asked consumers or customers what they want, they would have said they wanted a faster horse, right? And it's that balance of where sometimes the original thinking has to come from us as innovators and product developers. And it might be things that customers don't envision, don't know, and initially may even find to be not what they want. Initially, there might be a little bit of a rejection there, but there is perseverance required if there is sufficient belief and conviction in what that product is to penetrate enough to make sure that the feedback is right. And then it has to be tempered by, at the end of the day, there is no better alternative to improving a product, to improving an idea, than to talk to a bunch of different customers, prospects, get their feedback, and relentlessly use that loop to improve whatever we're building.
Sure. So now, being a head of innovation, I imagine you're looking at the artificial intelligence and deep learning and cognitive insight and all that. How do you communicate that to your customers without scaring them? Because there's a lot of trepidation about that out there today.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. And artificial intelligence has a tenet now that's starting to make way, which is it's got to be acceptable. It can't be a black box where it does something and you go, yeah, it does something, but we can't really explain how it does it. So that's the number one. In our domain, there are a couple of different areas where AI plays a big role. One is if you as a consumer are using your reward points and we recommend certain things to you. I say, hey, Henry, I think you would want to use your reward points to buy camping gear because you like to go camping. Now, this is where there is information that's being used, but there's also, profiles and intelligence and the AI kicks in there. Now, if the way that works can be explained, if I can tell you, hey, you tend to go camping, you tend to book travel that's adventure oriented, and so we think you'd like this, versus, hey, you go on a lot of business trips, and so maybe you want some Tumi luggage, right, for your reward.
Yeah.
You get, you can look at it and go, okay, yeah, I understand that. That's intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care if it's artificial or not. That's just intelligence, right? So if it is just intelligence that can be explained, the fact that it's artificial is only, details behind the product.
Well, that's a kind of subtle, and everybody's getting used to that now these days, because you've been here, your buying patterns, you might be interested in this, and that's, on marketing and consumers, we're getting used to that. But now it's, trying to creep it into other areas is where there's people are kind of a little concerned about, in terms of, just being too creepy about what can be done with this stuff.
It absolutely is getting there. There are many applications of AI that are very creepy and frankly scare the heck out of me.
Yeah.
Any other way to say it.
I know. What is scary is where you've got the self-modifying code type of stuff, where it will solve a problem, but you don't know how it did it. And if there's a defect, you can't go in and figure out what went wrong.
Yeah.
So, okay. So today, that might be a little unfair because you just started with Bakkt, but what are some of the perceived obstacles that might be preventing you, I guess, as the head of innovation, from achieving the success that you seek, other than COVID-19?
COVID-19 has obviously been an opportune moment for us, but spare a thought for people who've had to just shut down their businesses, right? At least we have a domain that we work in and a workforce that could do everything remotely. And funnily enough, productivity for us has actually gone up because people are focused and they're doing their thing. Our obstacles are going to be more in terms of, we are trying to achieve a leapfrog into a future state, which everybody knows is going to come and everybody says is going to come, but they aren't ready for it yet.
Yeah.
So just the task of whether it is consumers and their behavior in their lives, or whether it is people that are issuers of various types of digital assets, whether it's crypto, loyalty, in-game, the entities that currently have them and that have them in a locked manner instead of an unlocked manner, those conversations are going to be, I wouldn't even call them obstacles, I would call them hurdles that we have to cross over to get to what we want to get to.
Okay. All right. Yeah, there's a lot there. And I'm thinking even now, that's, everything it's slowed down. It's just going to take longer to get there because everybody's concerned about other more important matters. Are you seeing that as well?
Yep, absolutely. There is definitely talk to me in 2 months, talk to me in 3 months situation right now. Having said that, there are also unique opportunities that are presenting themselves. There are I cannot tell you the number of innovation stories I'm coming across every single day around how people have now figured out to overcome a situation that they were in. So it's going to be one of those situations where some stuff gets stalled and some things get accelerated because people are forcing themselves to invent and innovate.
Okay. So you're saying you're seeing increased productivity, but is that because people are working remotely and there's less interruptions, or is there something else going on?
I think mostly it's because they're not commuting, so they save that time. They get started earlier typically than they would. The interruptions being less for sure helps. And people have also adapted to virtual collaboration very well. We had a 3-day virtual offsite on product strategy. I mean, it's unimaginable that we could do something like that.
Mhm.
And I went into it skeptical whether we could make that work, and it was super productive, and I wouldn't have thought that could happen.
Mhm.
So I think it's a combination of technology usage and ability to focus and dedicate more time.
Okay, so once we return to quote unquote normal, what can you do to keep that going in the same direction?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I've been pondering over this question myself. A lot of people have asked me about it as well. I don't think we're going to return to quote unquote normal.
Mhm.
Right? This is one of those events that's happened to us as humanity where there isn't going to be okay, now we've gone back to normal. We're not
Mhm.
going to go back to anything. What will come after this is going to be a new future or a new mode of doing things, new mode of operating, which will be different. And I think it will come with a different set of challenges and a different set of opportunities. For starters, I don't think we are all going to find ourselves back in offices in full strength anytime soon. I think it's going to be a rotational basis. We're already doing that, and I know most of our colleagues in Atlanta are doing that, and in other cities as well.
Okay.
So different paradigm.
All right, so let me ask about this because you are dealing with a lot of sensitive information. Have you seen an increase in activity to further harden your connections for highly sensitive work because of COVID-19?
Nothing that we weren't already doing.
Okay.
You are absolutely right. We deal with a lot of sensitive information, and we focus very specifically on security. And as every other company that is in technology today does, and not we haven't seen any increase specifically because of COVID. Other than in the early stages, we saw some increase in phishing exploits on the emails and things like that. But that's, those fraudsters try to take advantage of every new thing, and COVID
Right.
was just another new thing. So I don't see anything specific.
Yeah, and I would think with, that Bakkt is ripe for the hackers to try to get in, because as soon as it's a consumer-facing product dealing with value, they're going to try to get in there and spoof you as well. But that's independent of COVID-19.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Okay.
And that's why we pay a lot of attention to security.
Yeah. All right. So have you seen any hiccups in the technology supply chain over the past 6 to 8 weeks?
We have, as you can imagine, doing rewards redemption, a lot of our partners are wholesalers, retailers, multi-channel, providers, even brands, various brands of products. And we have seen delays in supply chain across all of them. We're also seeing it get solved now.
Mm-hmm.
I would say in the last month or so, things have steadily started improving. And so there is a clear trend of at least that aspect coming back to normalcy.
Mm-hmm. So is there anything that you can do to help, prevent that type of interruption in the future if we get hit with something else that takes the business down?
Yeah, and I think one of the things that not just us, but every company is looking at is ways to diversify that supply chain, right? More specifically, if a company has too much dependence on a manufacturing center in China, they're looking at, can they go to Vietnam? Can they go to India? Can they do stuff in 2 or 3 different places instead of one place? And that's going to happen as a result of this and just an imperative to diversify risk.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, okay. So, what have you done to assure that your employees are fully engaged? Because now you don't see them except when you're on Zoom. So when you got the black screen and they're doing something, what do you do to make certain they're fully engaged and doing what you want? I mean, they're still going to be productive, but they might not be doing the right stuff.
Yeah, so the answer varies based on the function and the level of employee. So in our kind of business, if you get to the field level where it or supporting the day-to-day operations of the business, we have very concrete ways to measure their input as well as their output.
Mhm.
So we have, as part of the methodologies that we use for software development, we are able to measure very accurately how much output they are producing and observe and monitor the trends of that over time. So we know, that's how I'm able to tell you that, for us, productivity actually went up, not down.
Okay.
That's at that level. Now, when you get to more higher levels of management or other functions where it's more interface or marketing or HR, the sort of support functions, that, to your point about the collaboration on a video meeting, and what do you do when you see that blank screen? Well, we don't see that blank. Have people their video on, so we know they're engaged, we know they're having that conversation in an active and productive manner, and so on. So it's different methods, I guess, to deal with different functions and different levels of people.
Sure. Okay. Now, as we kind of talked a little bit about this, you mentioned that this is an optimal time for lots of innovation. So what are you doing to push ahead with innovation now as you see what's going on?
So one of the concepts that we've piloted as part of this whole COVID-19 situation is doing hackathons in a virtual manner. And we've had tremendous success with doing that. It also tends to, it's hard work, but it's also social. So it gives people this connect of interacting and collaborating and building something really nice. And that's yielded tremendous results. And we use this concept where in a hackathon, we always try to have sort of 3 categories of people thrown into the mix. We have, we call it the hipsters, hackers, and the hustlers. the hustlers who can make sure things are moving along, and the hipsters that can sort of inspire, motivate, ideate, and the hackers that are actually building it, and creating a good mix of that really helps achieve great results on keeping innovation moving.
So have you seen, I mean, we're going to kind of talk a little bit, talking around this again, but are you seeing an increased amount of communication between everybody prior to where it was before?
It's different. I wouldn't say it's increased, but it's different. So when we were all more co-located, working out of an office, there would be a lot more drive-by, walk around, talk to people, on the fly, whiteboarding conversations. And so the collaboration was that way. Now it's a little bit more of, okay, need to discuss this issue, solve this problem, set up a meeting. So the number of meetings, I want to say a little bit, unfortunately, has gone up. And then the on-the-fly collaboration, ad hoc collaboration, has gone down a little bit. But I think that's all, again, adaptation to this new mode of working.
Yeah, long as those meetings are actually working, productive meetings, that's fine. But if it's just meetings because you're coordinating everybody, all you do is spend all your time in meetings and nothing gets done.
And I'll be honest, there are some days when I feel like that. There are some days when I'm jamming from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and then I go, I didn't do anything today. I was just in a bunch of meetings, and maybe some of them didn't have been in, but it's hard to get that to a perfect level.
Yeah, I know it's frustrating when you sit down and say, okay, what did I get accomplished today? And you realize, well, I just sat in meetings. Okay, so let's talk about your backstory. Before we began, you were chatting about your defining moments. So you had an interesting career. You're starting out as a chef, and then being a musician, and now you're head of innovation. So how did you go from that to become the head of innovation? What happened? Where the lights come on?
Yeah, just achieved some decent success as a musician. I was playing the guitar and in a jazz band, and on that journey, and it's just, there were aspects that were unfulfilled, right? The intellectual side was just not being satisfied enough. So went back and did an MBA, and found a lot of interesting opportunities that came out of that. I did that in India, and the first job I got was an Atlanta-based company. Have been in Atlanta ever since, across multiple roles and multiple gigs. But yeah, I would say the defining moment was that realization that, sometimes the hobby is great as a hobby, but you need a profession on top of it. So,
were you married at the time or not?
no, my wife and I met in business school, and we got married shortly after that. Yeah.
Yeah, she probably would not have put up with you just being a musician either.
I doubt it.
Okay, all right. So, in a similar vein, thinking about, can you share an experience you had early on in life that still affects how you approach business?
I can. So when I was 17, I lost my father, unfortunately, in an accident, and it was a gut punch in many ways. And at that age, it just hits you so hard, where life just falls apart. Everything that you hold dear is suddenly, you're questioning everything. You're questioning your future. You're questioning the meaning of life and existence, right? So it just it put me in that zone, and that led me to a 2-year search where I looked at, I did all kinds of things, which I don't want to get into, but eventually I landed up with a meditative practice called heartfulness meditation. And that hasn't left me now. It's been 25 years. I've been doing it. I've also been an instructor teaching that type of meditation. And that just really has created this ability to focus on what's most important. So if you poll people that work with me and say, well, what are my strengths, then typically they'll land on the ability to be strategic and separate what's not that important and focus really on what's most important. So that's what I would.
Yeah. Well, that's very good, valuable skills to have or approach for being somebody up at the head of innovation or CTO and all, because you need that insight. So now, all right, so let's ask with this. What does success look like for Ravi?
It's really tied directly to the organization that I serve and the mission of that organization. I think it's the prospect of getting to this place where day-to-day consumers are able to have all of the value of all of their digital assets in this one app that they carry around in their smartphone and are just able to unlock it, I think would be tremendously satisfying to get to. And then, once that's reached, I'm sure there'll be another mountain to climb.
Yeah. All right. So tell us a little bit about the story about, when you started with Bridge2 and what happened between then and February when you got acquired by Bakkt.
Yeah, it was a wonderful journey. When I started at Bridge2, I was the first CTO the company had hired. Our founder, Craig McLaughlin, was he was technical himself, and he had sort of built the early generations of the platform himself. And when you come into a role where your job was previously done by the founder, it's always hard to sort of take that and run with it. But over the years, built a wonderful relationship and really started scaling that company. And our chief commercial officer, who then became president of Bridge2 and is now chief operating officer at Bakkt, Larry Wine, was the visionary that was able to sort of take us to, okay, from here to this level, this is how we get there, and go from that serving smaller financial institutions, employee incentive programs, to becoming a market leader in the loyalty space, in a fairly short amount of time frame. Was a tremendous accomplishment, and a lot of it was partnering with Larry, and we spent more time on the road than either of us, I think, would ever imagine.
Okay, all right. So here's another interesting question I always like to ask. So from your perspective now as the head of innovation, what are your top 3 concerns or challenges that you're currently faced with?
It's always being disrupted by somebody else. So I'm a big believer in can never assume. We are a nimble startup, but there are other startups and there are other people that are thinking about similar ideas. So disruption is always a threat. The second threat is we are in a business that by definition needs a whole ecosystem of players that are involved. On the one side, we've got providers of goods and services that become rewards. And on this side, we've got issuers of valuable rewards currency. We've got game providers like the Microsofts of the world, that have the in-game assets come from. We've got this crypto world that has its own regulatory and consumer confidence challenges. So it's the fact that this puzzle is a complex puzzle and all the pieces have to fit together perfectly right. That's kind of my number two concern. Number three is talent. And in technology, we continue to wage this war for talent and really, really struggle to find the best top engineers. And that hasn't changed at all. So, that would be my third. So it's really, the threat of being disrupted, the threat of not being able to get all the puzzle pieces to fit together quite right because it's such a complex puzzle. And then third is the threat of not being able to get enough talent to get things done quickly enough.
Yeah, and that's kind of so what do you do if you can't get enough talent? What is your mitigation for that?
It's beg, borrow, steal. But in all seriousness, we've been very creative. So we have resources that are in New Zealand, in Australia, in India, and Canada. So we look globally for talent, and we find ways to make people productive, even if they are remote. So those are a couple of things. We compensate people well, we treat them well, we challenge them adequately, we provide them a lot of avenues for growth. And those are all the sort of methods we use. And so far, we've been very successful with getting top talent.
All right. So now you said part of it is being disrupted. So what type of competition does Bakkt have for the space that you're playing in?
The good news is, as of now, we don't have direct competition. We have competitors that do some of what we do. So there may be competitors that do, for example, travel rewards redemption. So Expedia is an example, right? They're a big travel company, and this is one of the things they do. So in that narrow area, they're a competitor. There are others that are competitors in, we provide gift cards as rewards. There are other companies that do that. So there are competitors in that area. But there isn't one sort of overarching competitor that's a competitor in crypto, for example, and in loyalty, and in, so the entire mix, as of now, there's nobody trying to think about it this way, trying to approach it this way.
Okay. So if you're going to go out to a new customer who's got their own kind of reward cards and loyalty programs, what is the most important question they should be asking when they consider using Bakkt or working with Bakkt?
So it's all about the pedigree and the credibility of a partner that you want to look at to trust with your most valuable asset, which is the loyalty of your consumers. And that pedigree is what we bring to the table. And that comes from virtue of the acquisition of Bridge2 Solutions, which was already a market leader and serving most of the largest loyalty programs. And then on the other side, the heritage of being majority owned by Intercontinental Exchange, which, like I said, is the best example of robust capabilities to run exchange platforms.
Okay. All right. So now let's think about this. You've been involved with startups now a couple of times. So based upon what you've learned over the years, if you had to start all over again from scratch, what would you do differently today, and what would you continue doing the same?
Yeah, really, really, really good question. And I invest a ton of time, not just in the companies that I've been involved in, but I also mentor and I'm on the advisory boards of multiple startups. So the whole arena of innovation, if you will, is very close to my heart. And I work with a lot of companies on a lot of different ideas in bringing that to market. And I also invest in startups as well. So the number one thing which I would do differently, and I've started doing differently anyway, is spend a lot more time in assessing product market fit
Mm.
and do it before really doing heavy build.
Mhm.
Right? It's there's a wonderful book called The Lean Startup. I think it's
Yes.
not very recent either.
No.
And the author Eric Ries, he describes this 3 types of MVPs, and one of them is a video MVP, where don't even build the product. And he provides the example of Dropbox, where they just put a little sign up button and had the video of how the product would work, and they had hundreds of thousands of people say, yeah, I want that, and then they went and built the product. So that's what I would say is the number one thing I've learned.
So the Lean Startup, that was published in 2011, so that's 9 years ago. But interesting, one of my podcast guests here a few months ago, back in January, was Lomit Patel, who is with IMVU, which is a company where Eric was. And he's just published a book called Lean AI, which is in Eric Ries's Lean Startup series. So that's pretty cool.
Nice.
So
I should look that up. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. So now it's creeping into artificial intelligence. So all right. So let's see. So I think we're going to run out of time here real fast. So Ravi, thank you so much for your time. So how can people get in touch with you to learn more?
Yeah, thank you very much. I really enjoyed this conversation. And to get in touch with me, it's real easy. My email is simply my first name dot my last name @gmail.com. So that is Ravi, RAVI .VENKATESAN @gmail.com.
Okay. All right, wonderful. Okay, so we can keep going on and on, but I've really enjoyed speaking with you. So Ravi, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Henry. Really appreciate it. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the Business Performance Podcast with your business coach, Henry Schneider. For more episodes and business strategies, please visit welcome.ppqc.net/blog. That's www.welcome.ppqc.net/blog. And remember to subscribe so you can get the latest episodes. Thank you.